Hey everyone, this is Prince from DC Programmer. Welcome back to another exciting video in this Node.js MongoDB Express series. And in this video, we are going to talk about Google Authentication in our Express app. So as you can see, a video tutorial has already completed. It's almost 3 a.m. back in India. We have created this credential. Everything is in the tutorial itself. So as you can see right here, let me just click on logout first. I can click on login, and instead of logging in, I can click on continue with Google. And when I do that, what happens is that I get this Google's consent screen where I can select an ID to continue. So I'll select my own ID, and when I click on this, I will be signed in my application. As you can see, I can go back to profile. So this is what this tutorial is all about, handling Google authentication. So let's just start with our user setup. And actually for this video, the first and the most necessary thing that we need right now is Google credentials. So let's first get that. So as of now, you can simply go to this console.developers.google.com, and there you can select your own ID or you can select your own account, and then you will come to this entire dashboard. And here basically, if you have not purchased anything, that's completely okay. But if you are opening this for the first time, they will ask you to accept some terms and conditions, enter your country's location, and then you'll be good to go. That's completely easy. After that, you can see here you have to select a project, and then and here you will select your recent projects, a list of your recent projects that you have. You can either select a project or you can create a project. Now for this tutorial, I'm actually going to create a project. Now I will simply click on create project. Okay, and here it will ask me for my project ID. I can simply say, let's say test, and after this test I will click on create. Now see, they will simply give you a project ID, then I have to just click on create. After click on create, you will see that this project will be created and it will be listed here in my recent projects. Now once your project is created, all that you have to do, you can see here. So I will just simply click on select project, and then this will take me to that particular project which I have just created. You can also see here, you can simply select this drop down and this will show you a list of your project, and you can select the project that you want to work with. Right now I simply have this, so I'm good to go. After this, we have to first create our credentials. So you have to go to this tab which says credentials, and here you will see we have this couple of credentials. Now the credential that we need here is our OAuth 2.0 client IDs. So here, if you actually click on create credential, you will get this option. You have to click on OAuth client ID, and if you click on this, I think this will show you an error that says, okay, so here as you can see, it says to create an OAuth account ID, you must first put your name and consent screen. So you have simply select configure consent screen. You have to select your external because this is for a Google Workspace user. Then click on create. Now in your OAuth consent screen, you have to fill some information and then you will get your credentials. So basically here will come your app name, just as here you can see in this screenshot. You want app name, you want user support email, then your app logo, your home page link, your privacy policy, your terms of service link, and any email address for support. So I'll fill the information quickly. I'll put the app name as test. I'll leave the app logo as it's not mandatory. Here, let's say our application homepage is, and our privacy policy link is slash privacy, and terms of service link is slash terms. Now, although they're not available right now, it's always mandatory to put them. Also here in your developer contact information, put your email address. After putting my email address, I clicked on save and continue, and here as you can see, I am back to this scope. Now I won't add and remove a scope right now. The reason why I won't do that is because if you want to access a lot of private user data, then you have to go through verification phase, and that takes some time. So but like just for example, here you can see as these are some scopes that you can get. By default also you get a lot of scopes, like a lot of data, for example your ID, your information, and email address. So I won't add anything as such, right? I'm completely good to go all with this basic. Okay, now here as you can see, you have test users. If you want, you can add test users too. I don't want to, I'm good to go. Then in the summary, I have my entire data about my app's consent screen. Having done that, I'll simply click on back to dashboard. Once we're back to dashboard, we can go to this credentials tab, and here I'll simply click on create credentials, and we will select OAuth client ID, just as we have done earlier. But since our consent screen was not set, and obviously it won't be set if you are trying this for the first time, that's why we were doing the OAuth consent screen setup. Here select your application type to be a web application, and then you can change the name. I'm completely okay with the name that Google provides me by default, which is web client 1. Now here you have to put your author as JavaScript origin. So this is the origin that you want. So as you can see, I have to put my request from the browser. So All my requests are going to actually come from http colon double slash www dot, okay, not www, http colon double slash localhost colon 8000. All right, and here I have to put authorized redirect URL. So we need two URLs. The first URL is the one where I'm going to make a request, so paste, and this will be slash Google. The second one is where Google is going to send a callback, so which will be slash Google slash callback. Once you have put both of these, you can simply click on create, and when you create this, Google will give you your client ID and client secret. Now remember, both of these data are highly sensitive and should always be kept secret. Never share them in any public URL or any public place. But since this is tutorial, I'm just showing you this ID and secret, and obviously I will delete this later. So that too is a thing. Once you have done that, I have already created here this google data.js file in my config folder, because obviously I don't want to show. So here I will first say module.exports dot client ID. This is what my client ID will be, and here I'm pasting the client ID, and then I'm saying module dot exports dot client secret, and this will be the Google's client secret, which we will simply copy and we will paste here. Okay, now we are done with this dashboard part, so I'll simply click on OK. Here I can go and go to localhost 8000. Since my server is not up and running, I won't get anything. Now to actually handle Google authentication, we obviously need to install a package, and that's also a passports OAuth strategy, which is password Google OAuth 20, which it's not actually 20, it's actually OAuth, Google's OAuth 2.0. But since you can't put 2.0, they simply put it like passport Google OAuth 20. So npm I and this passport Google OAuth 20, hit enter, and then you're good to go. You can simply search passport Google OAuth 2.0 and all, you will go to that same code website that I'm talking about, or you can simply copy this code from repository or description, wherever you want. Now once you have done that, I will simply say npm start, and this will start my server, and now I can say restart, and you can see I'll go to my login, and now I have to handle my routes. So I'll open my code, and here in my routes.js file I need to create two routes. My first route is going to be um, Google's callback. So I'm going to have router dot get, and I'm going to call Google, and this will, right now I'm simply putting a request and response. Okay, so request and response, and then something as a response. And also I need another one. This is not just a simple slash, this is actually Google. Then I need another route, and that route is going to be router dot get slash Google, and then slash callback. Now, just as we have handled our simple login in a different code base, sorry, file, in my controller, I will create another file. I'll name this as, let's say, Google auth.js. This is where we are going to handle our Google authentication. So first of all, we need to get our Google strategy. So I will simply say Google strategy. This is my variable, remember, and this is going to come from require the code, the library that we have just downloaded, which is passport Google OAuth 220 dot strategy. So this is the Google strategy that I need. Also, I need my user. Why? Let me tell you the reason why we need this, because we have to make changes to our user database accordingly. So we have dot slash model slash user .gs. Now, just a word of advice for those who have never done a third party login or authentication service. So let me tell you what it is all about. So actually we have two different concepts. The first concept is authentication, all right, and the second one is authorization. I don't know if the spelling is correct, but let's see. And also, right now, I'm not going to use heavy terminology to explain. I just want to make sure that you understand both of these concepts. So, authentication is basically just saying that, this user, or you can say that user data exists. That's pretty much it. That's everything about authentication. So, whether it's an email password, username password, phone number, and OTP, the same way we have third party authentication services, right? Now these third party authentication services are like Google. So we have third party services. We call them third party auth providers. We have Google, we have Facebook, and actually nowadays any Zan company gives you their auth client. So Google, Facebook, GitHub, LinkedIn, Apple. I mean, if you see any giant company, you can basically get a what client out of them. About these two, well, since authentication is all about saying that this particular user or user data exists, what they do is that they give you some of their user data, which you can store for that user. So instead of manually putting my email ID and a password, what I can do is that I can tell, hey Google, take give some of my data to this particular website. I'm allowing you to do that. And what Google does, well, it will give you my Google ID, it will give you my profile, it will give you my email on my behalf. And now instead of manual entering everything, you can get that data and you can store it in your database and you can use it. But what people don't understand right here is the concept of authorization. Now what this means, well, authorization is all about saying that this data can be accessed or manipulated, basically changed by this user. What this means is that, let's say I want to upload a post on my YouTube channel. So authentication is all about all about checking whether this email and password belong to DC programmer or not. Authorization is where if I click on upload a video, YouTube checks whether I am allowed to upload a video or not. And that's what entire concept of authorization is. So anytime somebody changes their password or their username or uploads a picture or download something, there we don't use authentication every time, we use authorization. We see if the user is authorized to access the data or not. And here, even though Google gives us the data, right, we have to handle the entire authorization thing on our own, which is in our own, we have to store the data in our database. We have to check for our own sessions whether the user is logged in or not. And that's what we are going to do right here. So we will simply log in with Google, right? Everything that we're going to do in this video is we are going to do a Google login, right? Once Google is logged in, we will check if this email exists or not. Okay, if true, that means if the data exists, that means old user. Okay, now what can you do for an old user? Well, for an old user, you can maybe update the data. I'll actually put this all in a very better form in the blog, so you can read it there. You can either update the data. So let's say the user has updated his profile, you or anything, you can update the data, and then you can basically move on. Or if the user is, if this is false, so basically if the data doesn't exist with that particular email ID, what you can do is that you can create a user in your database and then you can save data according to that particular user. But remember here, let's say I signed up using my email ID, let's say prince@gmail.com, and then I have set up a password. Then again I'm clicking on sign in with Google. Now at this point you have two options. Either you can restrict the user sign in, you can say that hey, you have already signed up using an email and password, you have a provider which is a email provider, so you have to use that. Or you can connect both of these accounts. What you can actually do is that you can take Google ID too and you can put it there. So now this particular user can either sign in using Google or can even set up user and his email and password and can sign up. Now these concepts obviously will make you feel like okay, these are some giant things that we're talking about, and obviously they are little bit complicated to handle. I'm not saying you can't handle it, but right now let's just see how to authenticate a user using Google, how to save his data to our database, and then how to show him data, like how to just tell him that hey, okay, you are authenticated, you're good to go. All that I have to do is in my Google auth.js, I have to write some code. So just as we have done in our passport local.js, let me simply just copy this because a lot of code is going to be similar. I'll simply paste it here. So our serialized user and our deserialized user is actually simple. Okay, so that I will just leave as it is. What I'm actually going to change here is that it we take a passport function, but this is going to change. So here what we're actually going to say is I'm saying passport, the same password that we are getting, dot use, and password is going to use a Google strategy. So new, okay, why am I shouldn't have copied this. New Google strategy. So Google strategy. And in this Google strategy, all that we have to do here, we have to pass two options. Okay. So first of all, we have to pass the client ID, and then we have to pass the client secret, CLIE. Okay, I think I should first pass it, right? So here we will take both of them. Let's say const client ID is equal to require. Then I'm saying dot slash, okay, double dot slash config, not controller, config slash Google data dot client ID. And the same way we have client secret. So just replace both of them and this will be client secret. Okay, I hope this doesn't make an issue, right? Client ID will be client ID. Just change this to a small d. And then my client secret will be client secret. So let me just change this to capital T, copy, paste, save. Then we need a callback URL. So we have callback URL, and remember the callback URL that we put there. So it is http colon double slash localhost colon 8000 slash Google slash callback. And whenever you put your site to production, basically when you connect your site to your own URL, at that time you have to remember everything. I mean, you have to remember to change this callback URLs. So once you put this data right here, then you have a callback function. And this callback function gives you three things. All right. So this callback function will give you an access token. Okay. And then it will give you a refresh token. Then it will give you profile, which is our user's profile. And then it will give you an option of done. And this is where you have it. Right. So here, okay, why am I getting an error? I don't know. I have to use arrow functions. Now here, once this is done, why is it still giving me an error? I need a comma. Now here, obviously, if you want, I can just put a lot of data. Like for example, I'm saying console.log. This is if you put profile, you can get the entire profile ID. If you want a specific data, so you can say display name. This will be the user's display name. You can say dot emails, and this will be the list of users email. Actually, if a user has a lot of emails connected, you can get that too. So if you actually put 0, this will be users 0, sorry, first email or default email. Then you can get the value. So this is what we're going to get right here. You can even get users photos value. So that will be his profile URL. But after this, okay, after doing all this, we have to find if a user exists with this email or not. Okay. So for that, I have to actually say user dot find one. And here when I find one, I have to say the email should be equal to the profile dot emails, get zeroth first email, which is basically zeroth value. And then here dot, okay, let's put a then, not refresh token, dot then. And in the then, if we get a data, so once this is completed, you will get some data. So if you actually have a data, what this means is that user exists. Okay, and since user exists, all you have to do is update data, and this is up to you, although it's always suggested that you update the user's data, but that's still completely up to you. Else, if the user doesn't exist, that means you have to create a user. So now I'm saying create a user, and remember these things are for my own local database, so that because I still need all this data in my database so that I can later connect this to other datas. So here to create a user, all that I have to say is first I have to say user, and then we have a lot of data here. So the username will be empty, okay, because we don't have any username right now. You can even put this value to null. The email will be profile dot emails, get 0th value. Then we have Google ID. So Google, capital I and D. This will actually come from profile dot ID. This is the Google's ID. By the way, this will be unique for this particular application. So every time you log in, you will get this particular ID, and you can use this ID to get extra data. But honestly, right now, I think this is enough for us. Then you have password. So password right here, I will set password to null because we don't have any passwords value. Then we have provider, and I will set the provider to Google. And also we have an is verified. So since this is coming from um Google, you can either put is verified true or you can put to false. This actually depends on user, like what you want to do. Sometimes people just put it as true, some people put it as false. So it's still up to you. I'll put it as true because if anybody is signing up using Google, I know that you can't just simply put any Google ID. You can just simply create any Google ID and then sign up to spam a website. So I'm simply okay here. Then I will say dot save, obviously. And in the save, we will have a callback function. So we have a function. There is no name, but this has error and data. So once you have saved, all that you have to say is return done. And then in the done, we will get null and data. So this is our user, and both these are still okay here. They are perfectly fine and we're good to go. So if there is data, now remember, even if there is a data, you have to return null or else you will get, sorry, done, or else you will get error. So put here. Now I think we are good to go. If you actually get a value with this log, that means we have completed our sign up process. Also, after that, we have to actually go to our login.js, login.ejs basically. And in my continue with Google, I have to set that the href is Google. After this, okay, I still have to go to routes.js file, and then I have to call that to actually call in my middleware. So I will say require not passport local. This is right now Google Auth, and this too takes a parameter which is passport. And in both of them, I have to actually simply pass a middleware function, and that middleware function will handle the login. So our middleware function for us for this one will be, so when we actually call Google passport to login using Google, I have to say passport dot authenticate just as usual. And here my strategy is Google. Okay, and then here we have certain scopes too. So remember, you can put a scope here if you want some extra data, but if you are putting a lot of extra data like such scopes which you haven't added in a consent screen, then you're going to get an error. So basically, if there is any scope which you want to get from the user, like access to any private data and so, then you have to set that in the consent screen. And if that is private or very sensitive data, Google will first verify you and then you will have access to that. Right now my scopes are very simple. So in my scope, I just want to say I want profile and email, right? And I want only two things from this user basically. And then obviously we will have our request. Okay, now here we won't need request and response because this will actually send us back to the next, because this will actually then be sent to Google callback. In my Google callback, again I have to call passport authenticate with Google, and here we have a function with request and response. So passport, let me just copy this from here, although I won't be needing this scope. Well, let me copy this, paste it here. We have passport authenticate Google. I don't need this scope right here, but what I have actually, what I actually need here is failure redirect. So failure redirect, and failure redirect will be slash login. You can again set your failure message, failure flash to true here, but I simply want to send to login if there is failure. Or okay, yeah, let's send to login if there's failure. And here, if this is successful, then I'm simply saying rest dot redirect to profile. Now there will be a small issue since in my profile I'm rendering the username. Okay, so this username will be empty here, we won't see anything. So what I'm going to do here is actually going to get user's name, and then I will just put, we'll simply put display name. Okay, so I'm simply saying profile dot display name. Let's save it. Now hoping that everything is up and running fine. Let's restart the server. Okay, everything looks pretty good. Let's refresh. Now if we click on continue with Google, this would basically show me all the options. Okay, right now as you can see, I get this consent screen. We see continue to test, right? And these are the email IDs that I'm logged in with. Couple of them are of clients too. I will simply select my own email ID, And once I click on it, if everything is successful, I will go to slash profile. And as you can see, I am here back to my slash profile. I have my name DC programmer, and even if you go to terminal, you can see I am connected, and this is my um email, which is dcprogrammer@gmail.com, which I was basically printing. Here, as you can see, we set console.log. And now I'm logged in, so I'm good to go. And also to log out, all that I have to do is to click on this logout. This will handle everything and we will be good to go. I mean, it's not phone where I have to disconnect the ID. Once your session is destroyed, everything is done. You have to again sign in with Google to access information. So this was just a very simple tutorial about logging in with Google. It's actually very simple, and nowadays these are being used a lot because then you don't have to worry about people spamming your database with a lot of fake IDs. But if you're using Google Sign Up or Google Sign In, all that you have to do is to make sure you get your credentials, and then once you put to production, most people get this error once they just forget that they have to change this data at couple of places, and then they just push this to production, and oh, you are having error. Also, we have access token and refresh token. These are the tokens that you can use for either accessing multiple data, or you can send them further and do a lot more with them. Right now, this was all about simply getting the data and creating a user for our Node.js app. So that's pretty much it from my side in this video. I'll catch you up soon talking more about coding and whatnot.